It was truly the Dark Ages for the Church. Modern historians would say that the Dark Ages had ended, but they are wrong. The Dark Ages were just getting started. Gerald Robertson would have told you all about these hard times. He was a preacher at the Catholic Church in London, and arguably one of the best preachers in England. Those wealthy enough to be a member of the congregation said he was moving, absolutely stunning, and irreplaceable. They were truly blessed to have him. Gerald Robertson was a wealthy man living in the upper side of England around the beginning of the Renaissance. At the time, he was about 34 and married with 2 daughters. Every Sunday, people flocked to the church to hear him preach good Christian values and the teachings of Jesus. However, he was noticing less and less people over the past 5 years. He began to question his abilities, and if the Lord was continuing to watch over him. He knew he should not be questioning this, and that his faith alone should serve him well enough. But Gerald was a questioning man, and he could not help himself. So in his daily prayers he would ask the Lord for his blessings and his continuing help. For a year he prayed, and for a year he saw the same result. However, the next year, on Christmas, during his prayer he saw a light, and from this light came a person. But the person had wings. It was an angel. Gerald could hardly believe his eyes. He had never expected an angel to contact him. The angel walked out of the light and stood over Gerald's kneeling form. "Gerald Robertson," he spoke, "the Lord needs your services. The church is losing power and people are becoming unfaithful, and the Lord needs you to bring them back to faith." Gerald couldn't speak. What could he say? All he was able to do was mutter a simple, "Yes, my Lord." In hindsight, Gerald regretted saying only that, but the Lord had given him a mission, and he had to succeed. How could he bring people back to the congregation? By simply giving sermons in the congregation, it didn't reach the unfaithful. No. He had to leave his family and travel all of England and preach. So he said goodbye to the life he knew and left London with the next caravan. The caravan was to make a circle around the island and return to London. Hopefully by then the people will have returned to faith. The entire trip would take 40 days and 40 nights. The first city the caravan stopped in was Nottingham. Gerald bunked up at the inn for the night. The next morning he enjoyed a poor breakfast and went on to the town square. Here he asked the local shopkeepers about their faith. He was shocked by the overwhelming response of, "I prefer things here on earth." This upset him because one did not have to see something to believe it. So he decided he was going to change that, for it was what the Lord wanted. So he stood atop the fountain in the center of the town and called for everyone's attention. He started one of the most moving sermons he had in his arsenal. However, he barely got halfway before getting run out of town by the local unfaithful. He was very upset by the people's hostility towards the messenger of the Lord. The next city Gerald stopped in was York. Here he started his visit the same way as in Nottingham, bunked up at the inn for the night, and then went on to preach. Except this time, he asked the innkeeper about the town's view on the Lord. The innkeeper said that many of the townspeople had left the church, but were still accepting of the idea. This was encouraging, so Gerald walked to the town square and began a sermon. Only this time it was not a sermon he had done before. He simply let the Lord channel the words through him. This time the people did not run him out of town. They stayed and listened. They even seemed encouraged and happier. Gerald stayed in York until the next Sunday. He attended the congregation and spoke to the preacher afterward. The preacher said that people had returned to the congregation. Gerald was happy. His mission was beginning to succeed. His next stop was Liverpool. Here the congregation had all but broken up. Most people had left the church. He knew if he returned these people to the Lord, then he would have succeeded in his mission, and he could go home. He gave a sermon more moving than the one in York. It was so moving, in fact, that the congregation returned to its previous glory. The townspeople were very pleased, as was the church. Gerald's fame was starting to grow, and he received word that Ireland was in need of his services as well. Ireland was not too far from Liverpool, Liverpool being a port city in Ireland just off the coast. So he took a boat there. While in Ireland, he gave the most moving speech of his life. His fame spread all across Europe and beyond. People began to flock back to the church like pigs to slop. Also while in Ireland, he met a nice lady and had a child with her. This illegitimate child was his only son, and therefore his heir. However, the world could not know of this child because he was illegitimate. So he gave this child the closest thing he could to his legacy, the scarf he wore while preaching. The illegitimate child was herald to a family of preachers, all who wore this artifact. The scarf has become a family heirloom.